Hi guys, I am giving this screen recording software and video software a go. I'm trying to figure it out on my own, so we'll just see how this goes. I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the essay that's due in a couple of weeks, the rhetorical analysis, and just kind of, if I can, go over this assignment sheet verbally, as well as having you guys read it. And once I get this software down, I'm hoping to do this with more of our documents. So bear with me. We'll see how this goes. So this is the rhetorical analysis. Real life. This is the bigger one of the four major assignments that you guys do. I know that there have been some questions. There's been some confusion about the essays versus the discussion board posts. So let me just kind of explain. Anything that's in a discussion board post, that is going to be connected to these larger assignments. It'll be practice. It'll be some kind of skill that we're going to be working on for a larger assignment. But there are only 4 essays that you guys are going to be doing, and those are going to be spaced kind of evenly over the course of the semester. So this is the rhetorical analysis, and it is due on Monday the 23rd. So we have a couple of weeks before this is due. So let me just kind of talk through this with you guys. You guys have had some examples that you've been reading, and you guys have been doing so far a really good job of kind of practicing the skills of rhetorical analysis. But let's talk about some of the features of rhetorical analysis and just analysis in general. So one of the textbooks that I really like and we'll be referring to a lot this semester is the Norton Field Guide to Writing with Readings, and they define analysis, which, analysis is kind of a broad category. It can describe a lot of different things, but it's, for our purposes, a genre of writing that really closely examines a text, and a text can be anything from an essay or a book to a movie or a TV show, a video, a lecture, a picture, a piece of artwork. There are so many things that we're talking about when we're talking about a text. That just doesn't mean just writing. So keep that in mind. An advertisement. So it closely examines a text, both for what it says, so what the message is, and for how it's saying it. So what choices does the speaker or the writer or the artist or the advertiser make to get this message across? So you're looking at what it says and how it says it. And you're doing that with the goal of demonstrating for your readers, the people who are going to read your essay, how well the text achieves its effects or its purposes, depending on what that purpose is. So you guys have been looking at advertisements, for example, and obviously the ultimate goal of an advertisement is to either sell a product or to sell an idea. And so you're looking at these texts and you're saying, on the surface, somebody did a Katy Perry makeup ad. So on the surface, this text is, obviously trying to sell this makeup, but they're also trying to sell this idea that if you buy this makeup and use this makeup, you'll be more attractive, you'll be more popular, you'll be more like Katy Perry. And so I was really impressed with that. I can't remember who did it, but whoever did that analysis, kind of looking at how that worked. So any effective text is going to persuasively appeal to its audience, try to convince the audience of something or to do something. And then the ability to explain how a text makes its argument and persuades its audience. This is going to be something you're going to be using here at Rhone State if you go on to another college or university, but also something in your career. Medical professionals, for example. Analysis is really important when you're diagnosing something, when you're looking at symptoms and you're trying to figure out what do all of these symptoms point to. Analysis is important for a person in business. If you're in business and you're trying to figure out, what does the consumer want? You look at different aspects of what makes up this group of consumers. What are their values? What is important for them to kind of come to that conclusion? Those are processes of analysis. So analysis is a really important skill, and it's something that employers actually look for. They look for a person who has an analytical mind, has the ability to analyze. Okay, so when we talk about genre, you guys are going to see this word a lot in this class, genre. That's the way that I like to look at texts. And so when we talk about genre, we're talking about a type of text that has certain features. And so these features you're going to see kind of across the board. So most analysis essays or analysis texts are going to have 4 things. And these 4 things are going to be a brief summary of the text. If you're analyzing a visual text, like a lot of you guys did with the advertisements, then it may be a description. A description might be a more kind of apt term, so that your reader knows what you're talking about. The second thing is attention to the context. And I feel like this is the part that my students have the hardest time kind of grasping. So context is sort of what surrounds the text. So a text doesn't just sort of exist here by itself. It's going to be a part of something larger, a larger conversation. It's influenced by other things that are going on in the world. It's influenced by politics, social movements, cultural factors, art, movies, pop culture. All of these things are going to, in some way, influence the text. Sorry. So, for example, in one of the analysis essays that you guys read, you read First Eat All the Lawyers, which is an analysis of the text The Walking Dead, the TV show The Walking Dead. And what the author of this essay is trying to argue is that the sort of kind of fanatical love of The Walking Dead doesn't exist in a vacuum. It sort of coincided with these things that were happening with the economy. The economy was slowing down, specifically for people who had these these white-collar jobs. So lawyers, journalists, people who don't necessarily have what you would consider like useful skills. As a former English major, I will say that I fall into that category. If there is a zombie apocalypse or any kind of apocalypse, I don't know how useful my training will be. But she's saying that we're drawn to this because it's a real fear that many of us have, is this idea of being obsolete, being in this situation where we don't have the skills to handle what's coming our way, and we don't have really anything of value to contribute to society. So that's the context. So that's something that you guys need to be paying attention to when you're looking at the texts. So the third thing is a clear interpretation or judgment. So one of the things that they note is that by taking a text apart, looking at each element individual and as it contributes to a whole, you're going to come to some kind of conclusion about how, what the writer or the speaker is trying to say, but also how well they're saying it. So are they being persuasive? Do you think that their audience would buy into what they're saying, basically? And then reasonable support for your conclusions. And this is something that we'll have some separate information about, but this is really important. You are going to be making this clear interpretation or judgment, but you also need to be pulling examples from the text, so the videos or the essays, and saying, this is a point that I'm making, and here's an example from this video by Ken Robinson, Do Schools Kill Creativity, to kind of back up what I'm saying. So those are really, really important too. In some cases, you might need secondary sources. If you feel like that's something that you need, that's by no means required for this essay, but if you feel like that's something that you need, let me know and I can kind of guide you on that. So that's sort of those are the genre, kind of common genre elements of an analysis. So your prompt for this essay is basically you're going to choose one of these texts, one of them. You have two essays, the Singer essay, The Singer's Solution to World Poverty, and the Road essay, Why Looks Are the Last Bastion of Discrimination. And then you have two choices of videos if you'd rather go with a video. Do Schools Kill Creativity? That's a TED Talk by Ken Robinson. And then How Movies Teach Manhood, which is a TED Talk by Colin Stokes. So choose one of the four to analyze. And then you're going to kind of consider all of the rhetorical elements there. So audience, purpose, stance, if there's some element of media or design there, pictures or images, and then appeals. So ethos, pathos, and logos, as well as the context of either the essay or the video. So context in these, so the Singer essay, for example, kind of looking at, how we talk about third world countries and poverty. We're considered a first world nation and we're considered economically advantaged, and that's kind of what he's referring to here. So considering that context, or maybe in the case of How Movies Teach Manhood, you could talk about, I think one of the most kind of common references to like gender and media, as we saw in the TED Talk that you watched about advertisements, is we typically hear about how women are portrayed in media and how that might affect women who watch that media and see that reflected back at them. But you could bring that in and talk about how Stokes is talking about how, these things affect men too. Men also learn certain things about gender from media. So you're going to be considering all of those, and then you're going to explain how the text or the video works. So, by talking about what is their purpose, who is their audience, what is their stance on this issue, what is the context, and how are they appealing to their audience. That's the how it works. And the how well it works is kind of your conclusion about, do you find it persuasive? Or not necessarily do you. You'll think about who their audience is. You might be a part of their audience. But do you think it would be persuasive to a member of their audience? And I saw there was a really good, I'm trying to remember who it was, it's hard when I'm not face to face with you guys, but I read a really interesting discussion board post about an advertisement where there was a man in a refrigerator, and it was about TVA and talking about how you shouldn't have to get into your refrigerator basically to stay cool. And it was kind of a middle-aged man, and the student who responded to it was talking about how talked a lot about audience and how this audience is most likely going to be kind of middle-aged people, because often those are the people who do own their own home, who are going to have the forethought to think about investing in their home and kind of the long-term implications. A really interesting kind of discussion of audience, and that's important, is to really carefully consider your audience. Who would most likely be affected by or persuaded by this type of text. And then I had you guys watch a video on ethos, pathos, and logos, but just to kind of return to that for a second, just kind of a review. So these terms kind of cover three different kind of, if we talk about a rhetorical triangle, they're kind of three different sides, and they sort of cover three different things. So ethos is going to be sort of the credibility of the work. So if you're trying to build ethos for a person or a product, depending on what the text is, you are trying to make yourself seem credible. You want the reader to know that you are an expert in your field. You know what you're talking about. Maybe you build ethos by bringing in a lot of examples to kind of back up your argument. You're doing things to show that you're a reasonable person, you're someone to be trusted. So when you consider ethos, think about how the writer is presenting him or herself. Think about whether that person maybe has special qualifications to talk about the text. Those are all important things. Pathos is going to be an appeal to emotion. And, these can be things from, or feeling. I don't know that it's always emotion. You hear about the term sex sells. This is pathos. Appealing to people's happiness, their fear. Fear is a really kind of good motivator. Empathy, sympathy, sadness, hunger, in the case of some advertisements. That's all appeals to pathos. Have you guys seen the SPCA commercials with the sad animals, the sad puppies, and they're playing in the Angel song by Sarah McLachlan? I just cannot watch those videos. Those videos are just dripping with pathos. They are just loaded down with this appeal to your sense of empathy and sympathy for these animals. So, and likewise, another really effective one, as a mother, when I see advertisements about like products and how they make the world safer for a child, I feel this need to buy them because I'm a mother, and so I feel like they kind of pull on those fear strings. I think if I don't buy this, something bad is going to happen. So that's pathos: fear, hunger, sadness, sympathy, happiness, joy. And then logos. And back to pathos. Also, I would say humor. Humor is often, that can also bleed over into ethos. It can help you build a connection with the speaker or the writer. But humor, I think, it goes kind of, depending on how it's used, into both of those categories. And then logos is the last one for any fellow Trekkies out there. This is kind of like the Spock. This is sort of the Spock appeal. So this is the appeal to logic. And you can recognize this because, like when you see facts, figures, numbers, this is basically pulling in those kinds of things, backing things up with facts and statistics. So if you, to harken back to advertisements, when you see things that have a lot of percentages and, those kinds of things, charts and graphs, those are going to be appeals to logos. They're trying to say, look how scientifically proven this is better than other products on the market. That's an appeal to logos. Sorry guys, hold on one second. Sorry about that, guys. It was it's Sunday morning, the only time I could sneak away to campus, and apparently my family is helpless without me. So, okay. So, I want to skip to, skip ahead to your purpose. So, your purpose, I've kind of hit on this before, but it's to show how the argument in the text works and to determine how well it achieves its purpose. So, in other words, what is the writer trying to persuade the reader of, and how likely do you think the writer is to be effective in this? So, this is just kind of an example of a thesis statement. You can kind of use the format of this, but obviously, like, you'll need to customize it to your specific thesis. So, speaker X is likely to succeed in accomplishing the goal of getting the intended audience to change their minds about Z, whatever that is, because he presents himself as someone his readers can readily identify with, causes students to worry about their education and their futures, and offers compelling evidence that the problem requires immediate attention. So here we are hitting on audience and ethos. This was actually just kind of a random thesis statement that I chose, but we're hitting on pathos, so this idea about kind of worrying about education and future, and offers compelling evidence that this problem requires attention. So that's that appeal of logos, so evidence. So this is just, I'm a big believer in not reinventing the wheel. And as we get closer to our third essay, where you're going to be working with research, I'm going to give you guys some templates to use for integrating research. If you want them, you don't have to use them. A lot of people kind of frown on templates for writing because they feel like it's sort of squashing creativity, but I sort of believe it's kind of the opposite. I feel like when we're given some templates to work with, it frees us up to really think about our ideas if we're not constantly worrying about how we're going to present them. When I was working on my master's thesis, I really struggled with things like good verbs for introducing, for example, introducing research. I always would say so-and-so notes, so-and-so notes. And my thesis advisor pointed out to me, and she handed me this book. It's called They Say, I Say, and she said, use some of these templates. There are only so many ways to say things in academic writing, and there's no reason to kind of struggle over this. So I'm going to give you guys some of those, and hopefully they'll be helpful with that essay, but you guys are going to be writing throughout college, and I'm hoping it's something that you'll find helpful for the rest of the writing that you do here too. So we'll get to that a little bit later. Okay, format. I'll be completely honest with you guys. Format is not really something that I care that much about. I'm pretty loosey-goosey. I wouldn't really care if you sent me something that was single-spaced, 11-point font, you know, Calibri, whatever. But it is something that other instructors care a great deal about. So we're going to be practicing these things. It's not something that I'm going to count you off on, so don't let it be something that you get bent out of shape over. I'll give you feedback on it, but it's only for the purposes of saying, you know, later down the road, when other instructors ask you to follow these instructions, make sure that you're doing it. So I want to make sure that you know how. But again, don't let this be something that you're worried about. So, okay, minimum of about 1,000 words. If you're a little bit under, it's, you know, not going to be that big a deal. Double spaced, this is common. Pretty much everyone that you write for in college is going to expect you to do double spaced, 12-point times New Roman font. That's going to be true of whatever citation style you're using, whether it's MLA or for those of you who are going like into health sciences or education. Some of you will be switching to APA. That's kind of standard. So, like I said, I'll give you some feedback on that, but, you know, it's not really a big deal to me. I'm going to give you guys the citation information. I need to write that down, actually, so I can post that for these videos and texts. If I don't write it down, it didn't happen. So that you guys can just kind of practice doing a works cited page. Since we're all going to be using the same texts, again, this is not something that I'm super worried about, but it's good practice. And then a title. Titles are important. I do have a soft spot for titles. Something, you know, I love seeing titles that aren't just like rhetorical analysis of the Singer's solution to world poverty. Like kind of try to come up with something that describes your approach to this analysis. Okay. And then just a few tips. So begin considering the text by looking at the rhetorical situation, so audience, purpose, and stance, as well as the appeals the writer uses. And I have put onto Momentum, let me pull this up, a workshop that will hopefully be helpful with this. Oh goodness, I have 7 new emails. Let's see. Alright, so if we go to course materials and go down to content, I believe it's under week 2, we have a list of questions to consider as you analyze a text. So if we pull these up, these are going to kind of show you, so when you're kind of summarizing, these are kind of good questions to answer. But then when you're kind of getting into the meat of your analysis, I think these are great things to use to just generate writing. So I don't know how many of you like sit down at your computer to write a paper or to write anything, and it's just like, oh, where do I start? I can't just sit down and start writing something. I have to have some stuff with me, kind of some process stuff where I've thought through things. And I have to make some kind of outline. I can't just sit down and start writing. There was, I think it was Stephen King, maybe not, I don't know, don't quote me on that. Someone kind of described the process of writing as sitting down at your computer and staring at a blank screen until you started sweating blood. And if I don't have some kind of writing before I sit down, then that's basically what I do, is I just sit and I sweat blood, because I know that sounds like a horrible medical condition. It's just a metaphor. Don't worry. Don't call 911. But these kinds of things, and I'll post these kinds of things for all the essays that we'll do, different workshops, but it's meant to help you generate some ideas before you have to sit down and write. Maybe you can just sit down and write and just go, and I envy you. But if you can't, if you're like me, try answering some of these questions. So just sit down and think about, what is the purpose of the text? In other words, what specifically is the writer or the speaker trying to convince you of? Who is the intended audience? Looking specifically at, like, where it originally appeared. You can do a little bit of research on that. If it's a TED Talk, who do you think usually watches TED Talks? And then some just different things here. This will help you generate writing, and it will get you to sort of start considering these things before you have to write your essay. And I didn't realize that I had these in here, but these are some of those templates. So the following phrases and expressions might help you prompt you to integrate your ideas into your essay. So you can take these and rework them into your essay. This is not plagiarism, guys. These are templates. You're going to use your own ideas with these. But you could say, if you're talking about singer, for example, the writer employs like emotional language to, guilt the reader into, he alludes to, or he suggests that spending money on frivolous things is irresponsible. I'm not good at examples off the top of my head, but you can use these, you can lift these out and kind of fill in the blank, kind of like a Mad Libs sort of thing, Mad Libs for college. But use these can really help you guys generate text, hopefully. Angles. So after studying the text, choose an angle. So there are probably going to be lots of things that you could talk about with each of these, with the essays or with the videos. Once you've kind of you've chosen your essay or video, you've answered some of these questions, think about what specifically you want to focus on. This is about a 4-page essay. You're not going to have enough really room to focus on all of those things. So what do you want to specifically focus on? What do you think is most important when you're discussing the persuasiveness of this text? This is an important one. So remember that the people who will be reading your essay are me and your peers during peer review. So we want to see details and examples from the text to kind of back up your thesis. Don't just make a claim. Don't just say so-and-so uses pathos to try to persuade the reader. Go farther and say, here's an example of how he does that. Here's another example of how he does that. But you also don't want to let summary take over. You don't want this to just be a summary of the essay. And a summary is where you basically retell exactly what happens in something in your own words. So, remember that your argument about this text is what we need front and center. Let's see. Yeah, so most of it's pretty self-explanatory. The rest of it's pretty self-explanatory. Remember that I'm available to answer your questions. We have a learning center, which I'm sitting in right now. We have those on the Harriman campus. We have that on the Oak Ridge campus, and we have it on some of our other smaller campuses. If you're interested in setting up an in-person appointment, you can email me, and I will do that for you at any of the campuses where we have that. But we also have what's called the Learning Center Online, and the Learning Center Online is it's in Momentum. Anyone who is enrolled in classes is automatically enrolled in the Learning Center Online. If for some reason you don't see it in your list of courses on in Momentum, let me know and I'll get you enrolled. But this is a place where you can submit an essay. We have a lot of great tutors there. And if you don't want me to be the one to look at it, and I get that, sometimes you want someone who's not your instructor to look at it, that's a great place to submit it, especially if you're not close to a campus where you can meet with a tutor. But also remember, I'm always happy to answer your questions. And I'm happy to look at your essays before you send them in. And also remember that for these first 3 essays, you have the opportunity to revise. So even once you turn in your essay on September 23rd, I'm going to give you feedback on that essay, and then you are going to be able to incorporate that feedback and resubmit the essay if you want to. It's not required, but if you feel like you can do better and you want to give it another go, especially with kind of really specific feedback from me, that's the way to do it. So, yeah. I was about to say, does anyone have any questions? But you're not in front of me. Remember, if you have questions after watching this, hopefully I'll be able to upload it. You can let me know. I'm going to be posting this today, hopefully, fingers crossed. Cross your fingers. I'm going to have another short video that I'm going to do about your second essay, because there's some things I want you guys to start thinking about in conjunction with that, so I'll post that soon too. And I'm also going to be gathering some good videos about like paragraphs and topic sentences, kind of how to construct effective paragraphs, so that you guys can kind of be thinking about that as you're drafting this. Because I think the analysis is a really good place to kind of work on those really good structured paragraphs. Our next essay that we do is going to be a little different, and you're going to have a lot more leeway in how you work with paragraphs. So, and then we'll be returning to kind of more traditional paragraphs with your third and fourth essays. So, anyway, happy Sunday. If you need me, you know where to find me, and please bug me as much as you want. No question is stupid, and thanks for bearing with me as I figure all of this out. I hope you guys have a great rest of the weekend.